What's up, guys? We are here to go over a new tier list. So as we have here, we have 7 categories, each one basically boiling down to one of the 7 deadly sins. We have pride, greed, lust, envy, gluttony, wrath, and sloth. Now, some of the guys do kind of double up on a few of the categories, so we'll kind of give a little breakdown on a few of their kind of not necessarily character notes, but just kind of some of their traits and stuff like that we've seen over the course of the games that might or game rather that would potentially lead them into landing more in one category over the other. So we'll pretty much go in order of how they appear on this list. So we have ace. It's definitely not lust. Potentially envy. Maybe sloth. Maybe pride. Fuck. Okay, so there's envy, pride, or sloth. Fuck. I feel like maybe sloth, since he's usually, when it comes to events and stuff like that, he's like, no, I don't want to deal with doing this stuff. So we'll lean on it that way. So for now, we'll put him in the sloth category. Azul is one of the easier ones. He's definitely more greed into pride. So we'll put him in greed for now. We'll maybe switch him out into... It's not really envious. It's greed or lust, depending on how you want to consider lust. Because greed, lust, and envy are, depending on how you choose to look at it, those three can kind of mean the same thing. But it would make sense that he's for sure in greed. But, okay. Cater. He's definitely more kind of that, like, influencer, fashionista type of thing. So I feel like it'd be pride or envy, maybe lust, depending on how we choose to quantify lust. If it's not necessarily sexual desire, but just like an overall desire for things, which in his sense it's more to the camel stuff. So that could lean more towards lust, but I feel like I'd probably lean a little more towards putting him in envy. We'll put him there for now. Might end up being lust, but for now he's there. Deuce. We have pride. He's a little prideful due to his kind of like hooligan past and whatnot, and his gang warfare dream sequence. We'll probably put him into wrath for now. Apple. Apple, I feel, could go into either wrath or envy, most likely, because he's kind of envious of people who are like bigger, buffer, more in the manlier sense, or what he feels is the more manlier sense, because he's kind of more or less effeminate looking, which not necessarily a bad thing overall, but that's kind of more how he feels about it. So I feel like he'd be either wrath or envy. Let's put him in envy for now. We might end up switching him out to wrath, since he is a bit of a hothead as well. Floyd, huh? Floyd is very much a character who fucking switches up on a dime. So he is a little more specific in that sense. He's a little tricky in regards to that. He's not necessarily prideful. I wouldn't say he's necessarily overly greedy. Lust and envy, in the sense of him desiring whatever he deems worth his desire in that moment, could work. Gluttony, kind of in that same sense of lust, envy, but gluttony is typically used to refer to like desires with like eating and stuff like that. He can be wrathful, as we've seen with like certain expressions of him being like angry and putting the squeeze on people. But he can be sloth in the sense of he'll just about do nothing if his heart/mind aren't in it. So he could be honestly pretty much most of these except for gluttony. So I feel like lust would probably work for now because we are kind of going more on the. Most of these guys don't necessarily, and some of them talk about romance and different events and stuff like that. But there's not been any particular thing of any of them being kind of like an overly lustful character. So we're going with a bit more of a looser interpretation of lust, meaning just towards something like. You're lusting after something rather than fully lusting after someone. It's just more in the sense of desiring something. And Floyd is very much about he desires what he wants in that moment, and he's like, once he doesn't want it, he doesn't want it. So I feel like that's a pretty good thing in lust. Idia, huh? Okay, we have two definitive things for Idia. He's either pride or sloth, because outside of the gaming aspect, he's not above doing nothing, and pride because he's like, oh, I'm kind of like the smartest one around. I'm like the technomantic guy and whatnot. So it's definitely either pride or sloth for Idia. So we'll for now put him in pride. He might end up being changed to sloth, but I feel like for now he's good in pride. Jack, and he lust / envies after like power and whatnot, but I feel like his is more or less most likely going to be pride. We'll do that, yeah. We'll put him in pride just because he's definitely more of that kind of he's proud, like he chooses not to get help and stuff like that for fear / worry of being seen as weaker or less than. So I feel like putting him in pride is probably a good option there. Jade, okay. It's definitely not sloth. He could potentially be wrath. He doesn't really fit into any of these. He can be a little prideful, but he's not. Maybe greed. I feel like pride or greed probably work the best. He's not overly lustful towards things. He doesn't necessarily to be overly envious either. He's not virtually not seem to be gluttonous. He could be wrathful, and sloth he does stuff. So I wouldn't say that he's particularly sloth-like in that sense. So let's say we've got pride, greed, or wrath. We'll put him in greed for now, I guess. That would probably work. Jamil, quite a few that he would fit into. We have he has his pride, I'll give him that, but I feel like his main things are about desiring power, stability, like he sees Kalim's fortune as, with him and how gullible Kalim is and everything like that, he sees it as kind of like, I don't know if to say a waste is a proper way of putting it, but it's like wasteful because like you have all this, but you're like about as dim-witted as they come. You're like super gullible and stuff. So I feel like he would be either lust or envy. So we'll put him in envy for now. We might switch that up. Kalim, he could be prideful. He's not necessarily greedy. He has all the money, but he kind of is not above spending it on his friends and the people in his dorm and stuff like that. So he's not necessarily greedy. I wouldn't say he's lustful. He has pretty much everything he could possibly want, so I wouldn't say he's envious. He's not shown to be an angry person, so he's definitely not wrath. You could argue gluttony just because he has pretty much anything he wants, so anything he wants he can pretty much get whenever he wants, if he wants it. His affluence has pretty much led him to being practically incapable of doing anything for himself. So in that case, I would argue the best one for him is probably sloth, so we'll put him there for now. We might switch it out and put him in gluttony, but and he's more or less the top in line for, you know, like the family stuff. So you could put him in pride potentially, but I feel like sloth or pride are probably the biggest ones for him. Leona, ooh, he fits. Honestly, kind of fits all of these except for, I'd argue the only one he doesn't really fit is Lust, and he's prideful because, I mean, he's basically, you know, like a thing with lions. A group of lions is called a pride, so that, you know, that's a little too on the nose, so we might not put him there. Greed, you could argue he doesn't have much. He's a second prince, so he has to work for everything he has, so it's not like he's hoarding things, so I wouldn't necessarily put him in greed. Lust, you could say he has like a desire to improve his station and whatnot, so you could potentially put him in lust. You could potentially put him in envy because he's like, oh no, he's a second prince, so he's kind of like, oh, my brother's gonna be like the one to do this, but no, if I want to show that I'm worthy, I have to, you know, surpass him. So you could potentially put him in envy. He eats and does nothing a lot of the time, so gluttony and sloth and pride, I feel like, are potentially his best ones. Wrath, he's shown to be pretty angry at times, but I feel like he would most likely go in sloth, so we'll put him in sloth. Lilia, ooh, okay. He's a little prideful, I'll give him that, you know, given how we saw him in his dream sequence. Greedy, not so much. Lust, not so much either. Envy, you could argue a little bit of envy just because, you know, he's like, oh no, I've never seen this type of thing, so I want to experience it. You could potentially give him envy. Gluttony, I wouldn't say so. Wrath, maybe. Sloth, nah, he's not really sloth-like. I would say it's either pride or envy, just based off kind of his dream sequence. So we'll put him in envy, I guess. Malleus, ooh, okay. He's not slothful. He doesn't do things, but he also is not invited to stuff, so that's kind of... He could be in wrath, just as we've seen his emotional state pretty much affects, like, weather, and he's, like, you know, hellish when it comes to his magic if he's upset. Gluttony, not so much. Envy, a little bit. You could say he envies people who are, like, in the sense you could say weaker than him, because, no, he's pretty much one of the top mages in the world. Lust, you could say but he, you know, in the same sense of envy, he's kind of like desiring companionship and, you know, friends and stuff like that. So it's definitely pride or envy. He's not really greedy. He does go a lot with the Draconian name from time to time, as we've seen with events and stuff like that. So it's definitely either pride or envy. I feel like we'll put him in envy for now. Ortho, a little bit of wrath, a little bit of envy, mostly pride. I feel like his is a little more clear-cut. Some of these guys are definitely a little more clear-cut than others, so for now we shall move Ortho over to pride. Riddle is, you know, fucking... He's proud. He is definitely a very proud person. He's not greedy. He's not really lustful about things. A little envious, as we've seen, but that's also kind of his upbringing, that he didn't have a proper childhood, so to speak. He's not very gluttonous. He's definitely not lazy, so we'll have to put him in wrath. That's kind of... Wrath and pride are the ones that make the most sense for Riddle. Rook... It's most likely wrath or envy, as I would believe it, because he's, as he puts it himself, he's a chaser and admirer of all things beauty, so We'll put him in lust, just for now. That might get changed over to envy, depending on how you choose to view things, but we'll put him in lust. Rugi is... damn, he fits almost all of these. He won't do anything unless there's something in it for him. He's not been shown to be overly an angry or spiteful person, but if you wrong him and mess with his income, he'll definitely come after you. Gluttony, based off his upbringing and the fact that he's based off the hyenas who are, starving and whatnot, that one would make sense. Envy, he, wants to be rich, so anyone who has more than him would most likely be envious of. Lust and greed tie into that same thing of money. And pride, pride is probably the one he has the least of, so I would argue greed. He's definitely more in that greed, lust, and envy category. Sebek, he would be envious of anyone with malleus. He's proud as a half fae technically, but he's proud of malleus and being from Briar Valley and all that. He is greedy about things with malleus. He basically lusts after malleus, if we want to get into it. Definitely wrathful, not much of a sloth or gluttony. We'll put him in wrath. That's kind of the one that makes the most sense for him. It's either wrath or envy. Lust, if you want to get into it. Silver, not much in pride, not much in greed, not much in lust, envy. Just by virtue of him being basically the Sleeping Beauty character, we'll have to put him in sloth. Trey, ooh. He's proud of his skills. He's not necessarily greedy. Not necessarily envious. Lustful, not really. Wrathful, not really. Sloth, not at all. He's the cook of things and whatnot, and always feeding people and whatnot. So I feel like he would be the most that you could kind of have abide within the realm of gluttony. And Vil is pride or lust, most likely, because we have the wrathful aspect as well. Pride, lust, or wrath. You could argue envious because of the whole thing with him being based off the evil queen from Snow White is that. And then we have Neige, who is the one based off Snow White, so we have that he's like jealous of him and all that. So you would argue envy based off his stories. Pride because he's like, oh, I'm a model, I'm this, like, he's proud in what he's accomplished, but he's worked hard for it. He's put in the work, so that's definitely there. That he's allowed, not to say that these other guys aren't allowed to be within their specific categories, but he's the one that it makes the most sense for, and in the sense of it being the one that it makes the most sense for him, I feel like that's the one he shouldn't be in specifically. The other guys, it kind of makes sense for them to be like, okay, this is their quote-unquote defining characteristic, so it's a little bit different in regards to the other guys, but I feel like when it comes to Vil, the ones that make the most sense are pride, envy, and wrath. I feel like it has to be envy or wrath. I feel like you could say pride, most likely. Definitely all of them fit into multiple categories. Some of them fit a little less properly than others. Some of these are definitely based on a bit of a looser interpretation of the category of this sin, but there we have it for now, you guys. I feel like this is kind of somewhat of a bare bones breakdown, but I feel like we tried to give a bit of a somewhat generous breakdown for most of them, for how we tried to fit them into their specific categories that they fell in. Let's just go over it one more time, just in case there's anyone I feel like we could immediately swap out. Let's see, sloth. No. I mean, the one that we would most swap out is either Kaleem or Ace, but I feel like they don't really belong in any of the other ones that well compared to Sloth. Wrath, I induce desires to be like a good student, good person. You could potentially put him in lust or envy that way, but I feel like wrath, based off his gang dream. Riddle and Sebek are pretty self-explanatory for why they're in wrath. Trey is a little more of a loose interpretation in his way of gluttony. He represents gluttony in like kind of providing it to others, not necessarily that he's overly gluttonous specifically. We have Cater, Apple, Jamil, Lilia, and Malleus in the envy category because they kind of are more in the sense of they envy or covet things that they don't have as easy access to, but you could potentially call that greed, but no, greed is a little more in my interpretation of it is that you are holding onto what you have rather than going after something you don't have, which lust could be envy in that way, but I feel like envy is a pretty good category for these 5. Rook and Floyd being in lust, yeah, they're both kind of chasers of what they want, what they believe to be what they're about. So I feel like that probably works well for them. Greed, the hardest one to put into that was Jade, but I feel like that's kind of the one where he sits best in, at least as far as my interpretation goes, because he's not seen to be gluttonous in much of a way. He'll occasionally do nothing when he deems it fun or chaotic enough as well, so he could be there. But overall, I feel like Greed probably fits him. Azul was easy to put there. He was probably one of the easiest one to put in his specific category. Rugi as well, but I feel like he could potentially get into envy or lust. Edea, Jack, and Ortho were the easiest to put into pride. You could argue wrath for Edea and Ortho as well, because they're kind of the interpretations of Hades for this game, but pride in their skills and who they are, their characteristics are probably one of the main driving aspects of these 4 characters. So overall, I feel like I wouldn't change a thing in regards to where I put each of them, but definitely feel free to let us know what you guys think. If you agree, anything you might disagree with, if you feel like any of them might fit into a different category a little better. Again, I mean, I tried my best to go along with what I know to be kind of some of the more defining characteristics of these characters, their aspects, who they are as a person, what they do, who they kind of perceive themselves to be, and how others perceive them. So I feel like this is overall a pretty good characterization of who they are and what they are. But definitely feel free to let us know your thoughts, if you agree, disagree, anything you'd change, or if you believe any of them are, because this tier list did itself have a angel category, but I mean, outside of favorite character bias, you can't properly say that any of these guys are angels, I feel like you could argue Cater and Trey are maybe like the closest ones, but even then, they're no one in the main student body of Night Raven College would be considered an angel by any means whatsoever. But anyway, you guys, there we have it. So we're gonna get this video ready to be posted up day of, and we'll figure it out bit by bit as we get into the next couple of things that happen with the events that are coming for June, as we get ready for that to happen in like a little over a week. So we'll break down that video for when that happens, and we'll go bit by bit on making a few other tier lists as we need to fill in some gaps for content. Now, we will have the link for this tier list in the description for the video, so if you guys want to check it out and give it a shot yourselves, the link to this tier list will be in the description of the video. But anyway, that's going to be it for this one, you guys. So as always, thank you so much for joining. As always, feel free to share and like the videos, subscribe to the channels, all that good shit. Truly helps out and is appreciated. We'll catch you guys on the next one. Signing off. Peace out.